So, I thought it might have been interesting to talk about. An idea of is it worth it to actually buy to actually go to college? Now, this might give you a different perspective on types of things. For example, if I go to college and I spend $100,000 of it, will it actually give me $100,000 more value in my work over the years? Because the thing you have to consider with going to college is you're actually entering the workforce in debt. If you go to the workforce directly without going to college, you can start saving your money right away. And being able to invest your money right away is actually a huge advantage that people underestimate. So, on the one hand, my hands. Hello? Okay, there we go. So on the one hand, why is it doing this? Now, is it because I'm bleeding too far back? So on the one hand, you'll be like, I improved my skills, but I saw with that. On the other hand, I can start investing my earnings right away. And which one, and after 40 years, which one is in the better position? So this video, I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, it's been a while. But I just thought concepts like that was very interesting. The idea of investing money right away versus debt right away, but you're assuming it'll give you better earnings later on. And guess what? That doesn't always happen. That's the thing. It's actually a risk.
To college or not to college is a debate where the opinions often outpace the data. On one side, there are people who see it as the only way to get a stable, respectable, and lucrative job that will be the proverbial golden ticket to the middle class. And on the other side, there are the people who claim that a college education is for schmucks who will bury themselves in debt only to get a job that barely pays better than a lot of the other professions that don't require spending 3 to 4 years outside of the workforce. The annoying thing about all of that is that
So this is an idea that, especially millennials and later, so millennials, Gen Alpha and Gen Z, basically we're running off this assumptions that all the generations went off, and that, you got college, you're guaranteed to have a better income level. And that's not the case anymore because of basic supply and demand. A lot more people are going to college. The supply of highly educated is higher. And so the employers can be more picky. So you might not benefit from that college degree.
They are both kind of right, but in the wrong kind of way. College graduates still out-earn their non-graduate peers by more than 50%. But after accounting for the debt, the years of lost earnings, and a healthy amount of selection bias, the pay gap shrinks more than you might expect. The guarantee of a middle class is also getting a lot less, well, guaranteed. Male college graduates in particular have an unemployment rate just as high as their non-graduate peers. This is all to say nothing of our rampant underemployment because let's be honest with ourselves. The stereotype of a barista with a master's degree didn't come from nowhere. To make matters worse, on either side of this debate, there is a lot of money to be made either by institutions that need to keep their admissions consistent or people trying to sell you the secret to wealth without higher education.
That's another thing I forgot to, properly explain. See, the other thing is, people make money off selling these incentives. Go to Kelly's. I know what's good for your life. Like, I think this is Tate, calling your Tate, he's selling. You know, be a hustler or whatever they call it. You gotta go for your dreams. College, oh, I like your dreams. And people pay him money to listen to his advice. So, he makes money to sell this idea to you. And this might not be a good idea for everyone. And I'm sorry, this guy walks into all the details
through their Forex day trading system. Either one is an effective message to a lot of people who are often very young, very impressionable, and not very well equipped to be dealing with potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. Oh, and well, if all of this wasn't confusing enough already, there is now a multi-trillion-dollar industry that hinges on being able to make these graduates completely unemployable.
One of the things that scares me is becoming a parent. I just don't see how that's possible with having a student loan debt hanging over my head.
How much debt do you currently have total?
Probably like 80,000 in student loans.
I feel like maybe like 40,000.
How many applications have you sent out?
10 to 20.
What's the response been like?
I haven't had enough experience.
Can someone explain to me how I have 4 degrees and still can't get a job?
I have 900 plus applications, and I have received nothing.
What do you think about AI replacing jobs, though? Because that's a big concern.
AI will certainly be very disruptive because jobs will be different. The change caused by AI is going to be pretty radical, so there are a lot of jobs that currently exist.
The cost of a college degree has increased significantly, but just
Oh, this might be very relevant to you then, for talking to your nephew here. Okay. After watching, feel free to ask me questions. I will join too. I'll pause in and answer questions.
by the numbers, it is still a good investment, with a typical college graduate earning $650,000 more than a typical high school graduate over the course of their career, according to a Pew Research study. But just because something is a good investment doesn't mean that there aren't better investments available. So it's time to learn how money works to find out how good a college degree is according to the numbers and explore some alternative investments. This video is sponsored by Chime. Right now, Chime is offering up to a $350 bonus with qualifying direct deposits. Chime is the most loved banking app with over 1 million members. They offer features like fee-free banking and a high-yield savings account, so you're not losing money just to have a bank account, which honestly should be the bare minimum. The high-yield savings account earns up to a 3% APY, which is over 7 times the national average. There are no monthly fees and no minimum balance requirements, so every dollar you put in is actually working for you. You can also set up savings goals in the app, round up your purchases to go straight to savings, and automatically move a portion of your paycheck into savings, so you're building wealth without even thinking about it. Your money stays accessible and is FDIC insured through Chime's banking partners. Most traditional banks charge you fees, pay you basically nothing on your savings, and then turn around and lend your money out at 8%.
What is this,
Chime has no overdraft fees and actually lets you keep more of what you earn. To learn more and click Get the Bonus. Is college a good investment? Well, by the numbers, if you think you would be a typical student, then no. The $650,000 in additional income you would earn over a 40-year career from an initial investment of $150,000 works out to be an annualized ROI of 3.5%, which as far as investments go is shit. Investing that $150,000 into a broad market equities portfolio would generate returns of $9.3 million over the same 40-year time horizon, assuming historic market returns. You might think it's unfair to assume historic market returns, but by that logic, it would also be unfair to assume the historic value of a college degree, so we have to work with the figures we got. Using this strategy, a 4-year college degree would need to cost less than $10,000 for the $650,000 in additional income to match market expected returns. Cheap colleges do exist, and going to a local school can save you a lot of money on accommodation.
So he's basically trying to explain, if you take a $150,000 loan and it takes you so long to pay it off, compared to taking $150,000 in the stock market, what does that $150,000 itself net over 40 years? But the thing is, banks are not gonna loan anyone for $150,000 just to put in the stock market, but they do with loans. So there's the ease of loan access too you gotta think about.
If you are fortunate enough to be able to stay with your parents. $10,000 is a stretch, but with scholarships and assistance programs, it is possible. However, passive investing has some other advantages besides the mad gains. Setting aside and forgetting a stock portfolio until you retire literally requires you to do nothing. If you drop out of your college degree, decide that you hate the career you chose, or develop an injury or illness that makes you unable to work, then your college degree effectively becomes useless. An investment portfolio, on the other hand, doesn't care what you do with your life.
What?
As long as it stays in the market, it should be making you money. For all of you canceling your college applications right now, consider this as well. The earnings gap only factors in the price of attending college. It doesn't factor in the 4 years of earnings you would get by working a job instead of studying.
Come on, dude.
Today's typical high school graduate aged 18 to 24 with no further education is paid an average of $23,000 per year working full-time according to Pew Research. That's close to $100,000 in foregone earnings in the 4 years of college, assuming the student does not have a part-time job. If they did, the earnings gap would still be there, it just wouldn't be as wide. But that's not even the best part. A lot of these statistics are based off of samples from the population of high school graduates and the population of college graduates. As with figures derived from a sample population, they are prone to selection bias. People that meet the requirements and make the decision to go to college are on average more likely to have ambitions of high-earning careers than those who do not go to college or do not meet the requirements to do so. Now certainly, there are plenty of college students who are not very ambitious at all, and there are people who don't even graduate high school who hustle like crazy to make money. But on average, the college crowd are going to be more money motivated than the dropouts. That means if you are a motivated individual that's going to pick a non-college career path based off earnings potential, then you are likely to close the $650,000 earnings gap between high school and college graduates significantly.
I don't know, man. That sounds like a lot of work.
So why the f aren't people doing this? If you hadn't guessed by now, there are some problems with just letting your college tuition fund ride in the stock market for 40 years. Sometimes, gross returns are not the only thing an investor needs to consider. A college degree does offer some advantages in addition to its ability to qualify you for higher paying jobs. It can also qualify you to more comfortable jobs.
Going to college is like a safety net.
The TV show Dirty Jobs ran for 9 seasons between 2003 and 2012. And in its 179 episodes, a lot of the featured jobs earned very good money, and very few of them required a college degree. If you want to make money without a college degree, there are options available to you, especially if you are willing to work your ass off outdoors in smelly, hot, dangerous conditions doing hard labor that will wreck your body before your investment portfolio has had time to make you a millionaire. Or you could work equally hard in a temperature-controlled office pushing paper around a desk all day. You might think it's hard to put a nominal value on such a subjective difference, unless you went and got yourself a finance degree, in which case you will be qualified to assign your own multiple and conduct your own calculations accordingly. Being the richest person in the graveyard is pointless, and to many, a college degree is just as much an investment in being able to dedicate their lives to work they enjoy as much as it is an investment to make more money. Lifestyle during your working career must also be considered purely based on finances as well. An investment portfolio returning 10% annualized returns makes money like this, almost nothing for the first 3 decades and then huge wealth being generated in the last 10 years. Either of these return patterns are fine, if all you want to do in life is save for retirement.
That's the other cheat that I think people undervalue as well. When you're investing, the payoff it's basically like nothing. It's like watching grass grow, but the last 10 years it shoots up like crazy.
But if you want to travel, buy a house, raise a family, or generally live life, then you are going to need a more consistent stream of income like a higher monthly paycheck. The pure investment strategy also wouldn't work for everybody. The stock market only provides returns when smart, hardworking people innovate to make the companies they work for more profitable. Innovation can come from anywhere, but it does largely come from people who are well educated. If everybody just front-loaded their life savings into the market and kicked back for the next 40 years, then there would be nobody left to generate any returns. Still, that doesn't matter for you. As long as enough suckers still buy into the college career dream, you could still make the plan work for yourself.
All right then. Let's do it.
Now you just need to find $150,000.
Holy crap!
Raising this money to go to college is easy. The federal government and a long list of private companies give out loans to students every year to fund their tuition and expenses while studying. Because student loans are extremely difficult to discharge through bankruptcy, the organizations lending the money feel comfortable giving tens of thousands of dollars to an 18-year-old kid. The federal government, unfortunately, does not give out six-figure loans to people that want to front-load their retirement savings. So automatically, that cuts out the 68% of students that were going to make this payment by taking on a loan. Another 7% of students get through college thanks to scholarships that eliminate the cost of tuition. Unfortunately, scholarship money cannot be YOLO'd into the stock market. The remaining 25% would have to convince their parents that their investment strategy was a better use of their college fund than, actually going to college. Probably a tough sell to mom and dad, who have been saving that money away for 18 years. Also, if you do decide to go to college, you might learn enough about statistics to recognize the mistake I made a few minutes ago.
Okay, you got me.
I assume that because you were watching this video on how to extract the most money possible out of your working and investing career, that you were strongly motivated by how much money you could make by going or not going to college.
So what he's talking about, he's talking about the bell count. Like you gotta compare on equal motivated people on each side. So if you're gonna compare for undermotivated college student, you can't compare the unmotivated college student to a super motivated person coming out of high school. Excuse the
That
averages.
assumption wasn't a mistake, but what was is what I said about selection bias. If you have a heavily money-motivated individual without a college degree, you shouldn't be compared to the average person with a college degree. You should be compared to someone with a college degree who is also heavily money-motivated. The top 10% of high school graduates easily out-earns the average college graduate. But the gap between the top 10% from both of these categories is even wider than the $650,000 Pew Research figure that we have been basing this study around. There are lots of college degrees that lead to jobs with low earnings potentials, and a lot of people don't mind that because they just want to build a career around something like teaching or the performing arts. Is college a good investment? It can be, and it's potentially the best investment available to a lot of young people. Not because it makes them better and more valuable workers, but because it gives them access to incredible leverage through big loans without the possibility of a margin call. Obviously, this video is not to be taken too seriously, but I actually think this can be a great way for young students to think about their career options. If college is an investment, then you should treat it like an investment. If you were investing $1,000 in a stock on Robinhood, then you would look at the data, assess the industry that the company operates in. What does the future of the industry look like? How expensive is the stock? What are its earnings? Is the stock overhyped? Will the company still be around in 20 years' time, or will it be made redundant by new technology? Is there a cheaper way to get exposure to the same
So you can highlight this with schooling, just the same analysis of schooling. Will this career on trying pursuing college be around in 20 years? Will my work hours still be valuable? Will I be able to pay off this loan? Will AI replace my job? Am I an AI pro on job takeover? This is another reason why you're taking those high physical construction jobs, because it's very unlikely AI is going to replace something like that.
industry. People put a lot of time and effort into making decisions when they see their money is on the line. But pick a college degree based on what school has the prettiest grounds or the best football team. College is a 5 or 6 figure investment, and it should be treated as seriously as any other investment of the same size. And a big part of making good investments is assessing the alternatives. But is the investment worth it when a lot of college graduates don't end up in a field that requires all that studying? More than half of the Americans that do have a college degree are now working in jobs that don't require one. And the stigma around not working a white-collar job has almost been reversed as skilled trades people have started to significantly out-earn their office-dwelling peers. The decision to commit to an expensive degree is one that less people are making every year, and this is either a really good thing or a really bad thing. A college degree used to all but guarantee an upper-middle-class lifestyle in America, and that's because they were extremely rare. According to data collected by the U.S. Census Bureau and compiled by Statista, only 7.7% of Americans aged over 25 had a college degree in 1960. In 2022, 37% of the population had one. This was almost a 500% increase in the number of college graduates that companies could pick from. Now, if you do have a college degree and think that you are still in the elite minority, well, let me knock you off that high horse. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, fewer than 2/3 of Americans are part of the workforce, so a college degree is nothing special anymore. If you are a worker that wants bargaining power in their career, you really only have two options. Your first option is to pursue an additional degree that once again makes you a rare and valuable hire, but even that is getting harder now. As of 2019, 13.1% of Americans have a master's degree or higher qualifications. That means nearly twice as many people have a master's degree today than had any degree in 1960. Degrees became too common in the workplace, so people responded by getting even more degrees. According to the Workplace.
You see how he's comparing 1960? So, boomer logic is like, oh my god, you make lots of money in college, and that's simply not true.
Analytics firm PayScale, the average salary for someone with a master's degree is $83,000 a year, which is about a $20,000 increase over the national average for a full-time employee. According to the Education Data Initiative, the average cost of a master's degree is almost $60,000. The degree should pay for itself over a long career, but the numbers alone don't tell the full story. If you have the skills and the motivation to get an advanced college degree, you are probably earning more than the average full-time American anyway, so the earnings gap is smaller than you might expect. If the thing you want most from a job is a high income and career stability, there are better options than diving into the arms race of qualifications. The collapsing relevance of a college degree is either going to be a really good thing or a really bad thing for your career. And since for some reason people think that we are too negative here at How Money Works, we are going to start with the good news first. College degrees are expensive, and most students are paying for their admission with loans that will take decades to pay off. Student loans also negatively affect other financial objectives like qualifying for a home loan or starting a business. The trade-off of a college degree is that eventually, senior white-collar jobs pay more than senior blue-collar jobs. But that doesn't really matter anymore. College has become so expensive that the financial head start from not attending is getting larger and larger. And with the flood of college graduates fighting for jobs, there is no guarantee that you will ever get into one of those senior white-collar positions that make it all worthwhile. If you get a trade instead,
And by increasing the number of degrees, you keep increasing the price. Yeah. That has a different issue to it with it. Like you said earlier in the video, a lot of people are incentivized financially to keep people out of the workforce so they get another degree. So there's that. On the other flip side, and it depends on the personality of the person what they actually want to do. Do they have, like he said, alternative investments, alternative school? Is there a cheaper route of schooling, like your nephew? Is there a cheaper route you can go through to obtain some kind of lifestyle you want instead of pay for a degree that might not even be useful in 4 years?
You can get paid for training and you can earn an above-average income as soon as you are qualified. Trade jobs also make it much easier for you to transition into being a business owner. If you work as a business analyst, you can't really start your own company unless you...
That's another thing now. If he has that motivation to start a business, like any type of motivation to start a business or early a business, staying in college might not
have
be
a contact
right for
network good enough to land you consistent consulting roles. If you work as a skilled tradesman, starting a business is still going to be hard, but you can do it reliably much earlier in your career. If working with your hands is not your thing, then jobs in sales have potential earnings caps much higher than even senior management jobs. Even if you simply want a normal salaried office job, the declining relevancy of a college degree could be a good thing for you. A report by the Harvard Business Review found that as university qualifications became more common, recruiters and employers increasingly demanded them regardless of whether they were actually required for a specific job. you'd probably want your doctor to have gone to medical school. But does it really matter if someone managing a marketing campaign has a Bachelor of Arts degree? The good news is that more companies are dropping the rigid requirements for a college degree because most skills are learnt on the job anyway. The same report from the Harvard Business Review found that in the age of technical disruption and unpredictable job evolution, most degrees didn't teach skills that were relevant to most people's work. The report also found that companies still requiring their workers to have a piece of paper as a prerequisite for landing a job were hurting themselves by artificially limiting their candidate pool, or paying a premium for work that could be done by anybody. This was a report published by a school famous for selling those pieces of paper. When they talk about the workplace benefits of overlooking a college degree, you can probably trust them. It's true. More than half of American workers with a college degree right now are not working in roles that require a degree, on paper. But for every person working a six-figure coding role at a forward-thinking tech startup that dropped the college degree requirement, there are hundreds of workers with a 4-year degree under their belts who are waiting tables because they couldn't find work anywhere else. Sure, they are both technically working in roles that don't require a degree, but the nice-sounding headlines are covering over something that could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your career. You are paid based on how much you make for your company and how hard you are to replace. If you don't make a lot of money for the company and anybody could do your job, then you aren't going to earn much money. But if you make the company a lot of money and you have skills and experience that nobody else in the world has, your earnings are almost uncapped. Desk managers at hedge funds and world-leading engineers at tech companies can make millions of dollars a year for exactly this reason. The trades have enjoyed high incomes because it has been extremely hard to find people to do the work. Blue-collar work has a reputation of being inferior to white-collar professional jobs, and young Americans also reported a fear that technical roles on factory floors could be automated. But that is starting to change. People are seeing how lucrative these roles are, and they are also witnessing that AI is replacing white-collar work much faster than blue-collar work. AI systems can now construct a 3-statement financial model and
See, this was what I was I sent it to him. I didn't realize he spoke about AI. I'm glad he did. But yeah, that's a better question when he talked about how people investigate what they're investing in. You could take the same approach when you're going on your time for the college degree. Well, this job's still existing for you, so is AI likely to hurt this job? No.
Financial statements, but they can't tile a floor or install an HVAC system. There is still a shortage of skilled tradespeople, but if more people see the benefits of this kind of work and start doing it, then it will make them easier to replace and easier to pay less. Even in white-collar fields, the declining value of a college degree is going to cause 3 big problems for most people. The first problem is that even if companies claim they are dropping their hard requirements for a college degree, they are still going to pick the candidate who does have a college degree, in most cases over a similar candidate with no formal qualifications. A lot of companies have made big announcements about how they don't care about a college degree as a way to get some free publicity from news outlets about how forward-thinking they were. There was a market increase in companies making announcements like this during the period where businesses were finding it hard to hire anybody. But these big announcements were not exactly what you would call honest. A study from the workforce research firm the Burning Glass Institute and the Harvard Business Review scraped data from online job postings from 2014 to 2023 and found a 400% increase in the number of roles from which employers removed degree requirements. However, the study also found that companies didn't really change anything behind the scenes, and not even 1 in 700 of the analyzed roles over 2022 was filled by a skills-based candidate over a college graduate. The real problem that the report alluded to was that if people without a college degree were being hired into roles based on their skills for a job that typically requires a college degree, how did they get these skills in the first place? And that's the second big problem that the declining relevance of a college degree causes. Colleges are not perfect, but they do display to a hiring manager a certain level of commitment and ability to pursue an objective that anybody has the opportunity to complete. They are far from a meritocracy, and the problems with college admissions need a whole separate video. But if recruiters and hiring managers stop focusing on education, they are going to substitute it for things like existing experience and connections. If you want to get a job based on your abilities, you are going to need to demonstrate those abilities, and companies are going to be happy recommending pathways like unpaid internships. Not everyone has the financial stability to work for free for up to 6 months at a time just to get experience for a job that may not hire them anyway. A report by LendingTree found that 47% of unpaid interns took on debt to make ends meet, and those who didn't either had to work a second job or rely on their family to support them while working without pay. The collapsing value of a college degree is really only increasing the value.
That hurts me. Hey, a second. Please end the video, please. Definitely was spraying my ear.
Value of nepotism. Demonstrating the ability to do a job is hard if you aren't given the opportunity to do that job, which is where family support, or in some cases just getting a job at a family company, puts some young workers even further ahead of their peers. Children of wealthy families have always had this career advantage, but ignoring college degrees kicks out the ladder from young people who don't have any other way of getting ahead. It's hard, but possible for anybody to work their way into a good college. It's not possible for everyone to get early career experience at their parents' company. A multi-decade study conducted by Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger found that the benefit of attending an elite college for the average student was effectively zero. Students with the intelligence, credentials, and family backgrounds to get into these institutions would have done well no matter what. The benefits of attending even Ivy League schools is just the result of selection bias. These schools don't make their students successful. They just keep enrollment selective to students who are already successful, or at least the children of parents who can practically guarantee their success. Legacy admissions and the cost to attend these schools means that families earning in the top 10% of incomes are overwhelmingly represented in the student populations. The one exception that the study found were underprivileged kids that could use their college degree as a leg up into roles that wouldn't have otherwise been available to them. To them, a degree of any kind would have made a big difference to how much they were likely to earn over their career. Which means if companies stopped caring about degrees, it would be the people who need it the most who will be pushed the furthest behind. The third problem is much more simple, and it's the reason why more companies have been so willing to hire people without a degree. It gives you less negotiating power. Companies don't reward employee experience anymore. Internal promotions are rare, layoffs are frequent, and pay raises are barely keeping up with inflation if you're lucky. More workers have figured out that the best way to get the most out of their career is to job hop and consistently look for better opportunities. If you are a morally onerous company manager, then hiring an employee without a degree for a role that typically requires one is a great way to ensure that they are going to find it more difficult to get a better job at a different company that has a degree as a prerequisite. A degree is still a really expensive investment into yourself. And if all you care about that investment doing is maximizing your income over your working career, then you need to think very carefully about minimizing how much you put into that investment and how it's going to pay off for itself. Especially since the shape of work is changing just as quickly as the value of a college degree. And we're not exactly being great at preparing people for the realities of the current labor market, but that isn't stopping people from just blaming the workers. If a hospital is hiring a doctor, but the only person in town looking for a job has a degree in computer science, then obviously that role is not going to be filled regardless of how much time and effort the applicant has put into their education. The argument that you would have seen is that this same problem is playing out everywhere across the world. Which is why even if companies claim to be desperate to hire people, you might struggle to find a job. The whole argument conveniently shifts the blame of any labor market problems onto the workers because they are the ones that haven't trained the right skills or developed the right experience. The first problem with this idea, though, is how the problem of the skills gap quietly slips away during the good times. Research published by economists from Harvard, Northern University, and the Federal Reserve found a striking relationship between unemployment and the experience that employers look for in their candidates. The team collected data on over 36 million job postings over 3 years, and what they found was that the skills and experience required was almost directly proportional to the unemployment rate. In plain English, what this meant was that when there were lots of people looking for a job, all of a sudden the skills requirement for roles became a lot higher. And this is when people will start complaining about a skills gap. But when unemployment is lower and there aren't that many people applying for jobs, suddenly the skills gap isn't such a big problem and companies are happy to hire whoever they can get. Now, as long as they aren't discriminating based on protected classes, companies can basically hire whoever they want and ask for whatever skills they can. If unemployment is high and they can be greedy with their job requirements, that's just business. But The problem is, the myth of the skills gap is used to justify a lot of bad stuff. The first is simply lower wages. If companies post a position with high skill requirements and they don't get any applicants that meet their unreasonably high bar, they can go back to the best applicant with a lower salary and benefit offer than advertised, pointing out the gaps in their skills as a reason for the lower offer. This is just basic salary negotiation tactics. But the myth of the skills gap makes it easier for companies to get away with this. A report by MIT found that most jobs advertised in America asked for skills like programming that were actually not required to perform the job. They looked specifically at IT help desk technicians that deal with computers. So most companies ask for programming skills. The thing is though, most IT help desk techs don't actually use programming for anything. But a lot of companies just assume that computers equal code and so make it a job requirement. The report actually found that programming was just as useful in manufacturing plants as it was in IT help desk work. But factory machine operators were far more likely to get on-the-job training on how to program their machines than IT workers who were just assumed to know how to code. But lower wages are far from the worst thing that the myth of the skills gap has been used to push for. It's also been an incredible tool for lobbying on migration policy, education funding, and workplace protections. These are worth looking at one by one, because you are probably going to start hearing a lot of familiar sound bites. If there was actually a supply of good-paying jobs available to people that were going unfilled because of the skills gap, then the traditional market assumption would be that people would retrain to fill those roles to increase their income and job security. But that isn't happening because there are problems with every part of this assumption. The first problem is that a lot of the jobs we have a skills gap for here in America don't actually pay that well. According to a report by the Society of Resource Management, the hardest roles to fill currently include jobs like nursing, teaching, the trades, and social service work. Most jobs in these roles do not pay enough to support a comfortable life in a major city, especially for entry-level employees into the roles. The trades can be great, but apprentice tradesmen are not going to earn much until they are fully qualified, and even then, they need to work significant overtime or own their own business to make a comfortable salary in most parts of the country. Even still, they are going to be better off than teachers and nurses who not only need a college degree where they won't be paid anything, they also need on-the-job training before they are earning anything at all. That's on top of reports about extreme job stress, brutal work schedules, and the general lack of respect these roles receive. Putting your career on hold, spending tens of thousands of dollars on a college degree, and dealing with difficult patients or often dangerous patients or children is not that enticing to Americans who would consider a career switch because the income for these roles hasn't risen in line with the demand gap. There is not a skill shortage. There is just a shortage of people who want to do difficult jobs for bad pay. People in these roles who already have the skills to perform the job at a high level are leaving because it's just not worth making the sacrifices necessary when there are easier jobs that pay just as much or more. A counterexample to this trend was the rush to train computer science. The tech industry in the 2000s was expanding rapidly, and we didn't have enough coders to perform roles that actually needed programming skills. The allure of high-paying, respected jobs with a good work-life balance meant a lot of very smart people moved into that career path to fill the skills gap because there was a real reward for doing so. Now, there are actually too many qualified programmers, and as the tech industry has cooled down, hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off. Just 5 years ago, though, they would have been told that there isn't enough programmers, and companies are hiring whoever they can as fast as they can. So the assumption that empty jobs are just waiting to be filled and the only thing standing in the way is the skills gap can be a bit dangerous. But the final piece of the puzzle is how profitable fixing this myth can be. Politicians can win some easy political points by talking about retraining programs, and companies can push the responsibility of staff training onto their workers or those government programs. The market research firm Allied Market Research values the corporate training market at over $361 billion, with it projected to grow to over $800 billion by 2035. That's a major industry just by itself, and it relies heavily on people believing that they are just one qualification away from landing a job that is just desperate to find the right worker. This industry is separate from traditional colleges and trade schools, but you already know what a mess that whole thing is. The skills gap has been a major lobbying tool by companies to push for this kind of training. Siemens, an industrial equipment manufacturer, paid for an article in The Atlantic talking directly to policymakers that the apprenticeships were the secret to closing the skills gap. Apprenticeships are actually great, but the reason that Siemens was paying to publish this article is that it would give them a new pool of skilled workers to pick from, not because they wanted to help out with labor force policies. And this is where you get to the most controversial part of the skills gap. It's used to justify immigration. Now, this is obviously a heated topic that everybody has their own set of opinions on, but it is possible to advocate for more careful and deliberate immigration policies without going full, they took our jobs. The skills gap has been used to push for a lot of skilled migration, which has arguably gone too far in America, but has been even more obvious in places like Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, and New Zealand. The reason companies like this is because it lets them fill roles without putting upward pressure on salaries, and more people means more customers to sell products to. But with that downward pressure on salaries, the American dream is starting to look like something that very few people will ever be able to achieve. How much money would you need to buy the American dream? Not how much would you need to make in order to afford the repayments on the American dream. How much would you need to buy the house, the 2 cars, the family, and a basic vacation every year? I know it's not going to blow your mind to find out that these supposedly vital ingredients to a good life have gotten kind of expensive, but it has reached a tipping point. The American dream is not dead, so much as it's an extreme luxury in many parts of the country that can now cost as much as $10 million to afford. That's more than most of us will ever earn in our lifetimes before taxes, interest payments, and basic essentials like food. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but holding on to the traditional financial wisdom of what you ought to have in life is now permanently out of reach for most people. And as more Americans realize this, it's fundamentally reshaping our economy. There are 3 points to this video that are each obvious by themselves, but get really interesting or worrying when you think about them all together. The first point is that the typical American dream has gone from an affordable lifestyle that even someone with a basic job could afford to live to an extreme luxury that even professional dual-income households are struggling to keep up with. The second point is that alternative lifestyles that used to be considered extremely luxurious have become way more affordable than a cookie-cutter suburban home with a 30-year mortgage. And the third point is what happens when people are making the logical choice and picking the better life for themselves. Now, I am calling it the American dream because it looks better in the title of a YouTube video. But let's be honest, the story is the same around the world, and some places have it even worse than us. According to data from the US Fed and the US Census Bureau compiled in the Case-Shiller Index, the average cost of a home in the US is now more than 7.6 times median combined household incomes. That's now significantly higher than it was in the lead up to the global financial crisis, an economic meltdown enabled by housing speculation. If you think that's bad, spare a thought for the UK, which has lower wages but similarly priced homes, or Canadians, who, according to data compiled by Financial Samurai, have on average 10% less disposable income but live in houses 75% more expensive. New mortgage rates are also at the highest point they have been since the year 2000, when home prices were only 4 times household income. The average
I don't know if you remember. But this ties into last that we spoke up about last week. Like I was saying, America might be in a rough spot as a whole as far as the economy, but look what he's talking about with these other countries. The grass is greener on the other side of the fence. It's usual. All these other countries have problems too, and they have cost of living problems too.
average person, even if they have a full-time working partner, cannot reasonably afford to purchase an average home at current prices with current interest rates without paying more than half of their before-tax income in interest. That's before principal repayments on the loan, and before income tax. In reality, the average bank wouldn't even write this mortgage because it would be financially irresponsible. Now, housing is expensive. You don't need me to tell you that. But every other part of the American dream has somehow become even more expensive. The cost of a car, a basic college degree, insurance, and medical care have all outpaced inflation, which is also at decade highs. The only way to keep up with these prices is to be benefiting from them. Every chart related to your personal finances is up and to the left. But investment asset classes are up even more. The average house is now earning more than the average American in capital gains that are taxed more favorably, and the stock market continues to break new records. Adjusted for inflation, household incomes have increased by 20% since 2005.
Outside the last year down, this video has aged pretty well. The stock market being at all-time highs only took place 8 days ago, to be exact.
But the Nasdaq is up by 340%. People who have had time to amass assets or children who are lucky enough to open an account with the First National Bank of mommy and daddy are the only people left who can afford the trappings of the middle class. But this isn't yet another video telling you how financially f***ed you are. I actually have good news, which is that more young Americans than ever are opting out of the American dream, as the price to buy a rundown family home can buy them a much better lifestyle by just rejecting traditions. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why it might be time to let go of the American dream. There's one expense.
Good morning, thanks for coming by. Well, we're laying back economics and the cost of a college degree. Or true costs, because instead of going to college, you could always invest that money first.
That has grown faster than all others, so much that it has become a status symbol even though it's technically free. And that's having children. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the inflation-adjusted cost of raising a child has increased by more than 50% since 2000, and some of the biggest expenses are now 250% of what they were 24 years ago. This data was collected for husband and wife families, so it averages out the cost of one partner needing to take time off work to look after children. The reason this is happening is because less people are having children. Young working professionals earn too much to be eligible for most child subsidies, but too little to really afford to raise children. The only people that can afford to have children are very wealthy people who don't care about spending thousands of dollars a year on the best preschools and paraphernalia for their child. This means that only expensive, high-end services catering to the children of affluent families can count on a reliable stream of business, so the expensive options are the only ones that last in the market. There is also a large group of people with lower incomes that still have a lot of children, but according to the US Census Bureau, that's partially why America has higher rates of child poverty than elder poverty. A study by the Tax Foundation found that married couples with children were the fastest shrinking group in middle-income percentiles because people couldn't afford to raise children. The Tax Foundation is a think tank that lobbies for lower taxes and lower government spending, so they might have an agenda with this report. But the numbers don't lie. People want to have children, they just can't afford to. Because even though it was something that people just assumed they were going to do in previous generations, it became one of the most expensive luxuries in our modern world. But just as everything you need to live a normal life is becoming prohibitively expensive for normal people, previously luxurious alternatives are becoming much cheaper. Remote work has allowed a lot of young people to get a job or sometimes multiple jobs at the same time and then do them from anywhere in the world. Traveling the world full-time or living in a cheap but exotic destination was the reserve of the jet-set class just a few years ago. But now almost anybody can do it while saving more money than they can get in a major city. These so-called digital nomads have gone from a small niche group to a major component of the workforce in less than a decade. A survey conducted by the workforce intelligence firm MBO Partners and published by the Harvard Business Review found that 17.3 million American workers now describe themselves as digital nomads, representing a 150% increase since 2019 alone. In this survey, digital nomads could include anybody from the tech worker sailing around the world, submitting their code once a day via Starlink, to a traveling nurse living out of a van, to someone who simply moved to a more affordable city temporarily.
And like I said, like I was saying the other day, Starlink is actually very niche, but if you're on the, but if you're traveling around, it's like this.
To work remotely. In their research, the team for HBR found that the #1 reason that people were pursuing this unrooted lifestyle was because they couldn't afford a more typical way of life. And if they were going to be uncomfortable both physically and financially, they would rather be uncomfortable while seeing the world. The sacrifices that you need to make to hit the road are much smaller than they used to be too. Remote jobs are still hard to land, but they are not nearly as hard to find as they used to be. Some people in remote work heavy fields like technology, data, or media creation have even created forums about doing multiple full-time jobs at the same time to make several full-time incomes. Living in a different country has also become a lot easier. Some popular centers with budget-conscious digital nomads are safer, cleaner, and have better amenities than American cities that are unaffordable. Some countries are so welcoming to young remote workers that they have even started offering digital nomad visas to simplify the legal and tax considerations of working in another country. Even if you feel lonely and want to see your friends and family frequently, saving $2,000 a month on rent buys a lot of plane tickets on budget carriers, since airline tickets are another thing that have noticeably become cheaper while everything else is getting more expensive. There are still hardships with living abroad, but they are getting easier every day, all while the American dream is getting harder. Now, not everybody priced out of living a normal life is pursuing such an adventurous alternative. There are some people that have been able to make the best of a bad situation, but there are far more young people across the world who are just giving up. In a time when the average American can't afford an unexpected $1,000 expense, luxury good companies selling $5,000 handbags or $10,000 watches are making record profits. This is because of a phenomenon known as doom spending. If you have worked hard in school, landed a good job, worked for 10 years,
And like we talked about before, not only is doom spending a thing, but doom investing. I'm not gonna afford a life anyways, so I might as well do everything to start working and see if it goes up 10 times.
and are no closer to owning a home of your own, it's reasonable to want to see some kind of reward for all of your hard work. If you can't afford a sensible purchase to treat yourself, you could at least buy something that makes it look like you have some kind of financial stability in your life. It's not logical, but these companies don't make billions of dollars selling $2,000 shoes by appealing to logic. Doom spending is all a part of a bigger trend of people just giving up. In countries like China, where competition for housing and other essentials is even worse than here in America, there is a lying down movement. Young people are not going to work or school and are lying flat all day playing video games and relaxing. The trend was such a threat to the country that the government banned the term on all social media. And that might be the most important part of the dying American dream. What happens when everybody gives up on it? The American dream only works if most people believe in it to keep the system going. Maybe the boomers had it coming as they voted. Trend of people just giving up. In countries like China, where competition for housing and other essentials is even worse than here in America, there is a lying down movement. Young people are not going to work or school.
I am not going to after school and just play video games all day. Nothing to YouTubers.
And are lying flat all day playing video games and relaxing. The trend was such a threat to the country that the government banned the term on all social media. And that might be the most important part of the dying American dream. What happens when everybody gives up on it? The American dream only works if most people believe in it to keep the system going. Maybe the boomers had it coming as they voted for policies that benefited them above their children, and now their children don't want to keep their system going. But I am sorry to tell you that most boomers are going to be dead before this really becomes a problem. It's hard for Americans to stop paying tax if they go and work in a different country, because we are one of the only countries in the world that still taxes its citizens even if they live abroad. But for other countries, losing workers who are moving elsewhere for a better life has already become a major drain on the systems that are funding their aging populations. Even if young Americans are trapped by Uncle Sam, they may not pay him as much. To be comfortable in a city like San Francisco, where the median house price is almost $1.3 million according to Zillow, experts estimate that you need an income of around $300,000 to live a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, if it could be called that. To sustainably fund that level of income in retirement, you would need invested assets of around $8 million outside your primary residence. The federal tax and FICA on that income for a single filer is $87,000 combined. But people live in San Francisco because they can earn that much in the area. But more people in these high-end jobs are willing to take a pay cut to work remotely in cheaper American cities, or a cheaper country. Google cut some of its workers' pay by 25%, and some of its workers were happy to accept it because they could work from somewhere that was 4 times cheaper. The federal tax in FICA on a salary of $225,000 is only $59,000. Which means after state taxes, this remote worker would only be really taking home $35,000 less every year. But the tax system misses out on about the same amount. But when even these workers at the very top end of the labor market can't earn enough with their work to catch up to other people, you can't really blame them for giving up on the American dream. But all of this might just be part of a natural cycle that has been happening for hundreds of years. Just a century ago, automotive jobs were replacing horse-drawn cart repairs and making saddlery. This time, it's the AI takeover, which seems to be doomed to wreck the economy whether it takes our jobs or not. Nobody knows what the future of AI really looks like, but no matter which way it goes, it does seem like we have put ourselves in a position where, if AI fails, the entire economy collapses with it and we lose our jobs, but if AI succeeds, it will only be because it has taken all of our jobs. Whether we like it or not, our immediate economic future is riding on the success or failure of this technology. Just the top companies are on track to spend $400 billion on data center buildouts this year alone, and the entire stock market has clearly been buoyed by investor hype around what this technology could do at some undetermined point in the future. Now, that has done two things in the short term. Trillions of dollars worth of data centers may or may not turn out to be a spectacular waste of money. But, at least for now, they are providing tens of thousands of high-paying jobs to engineers, tradesmen, and technicians all across the country. The same goes for the stock market. These impressive gains may or may not be backed by sustainable fundamentals. But, at least for now, people who have seen their portfolios double in value over the last 3 years are feeling pretty good about treating themselves to a bit of conspicuous consumption, hoping to keep the rest of the economy afloat. Now, I know the problem of our entire economy being kept alive by unsustainable capital expenditure and questionable financial gains is not exactly shocking news to anybody anymore. In fact, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance your entire subscription feed hasn't shut up about the AI bubble all year. And in our defense, if this bubble pops, it will probably take the rest of the already shaky.
Wait. Did he say, oh yeah? Oh my freaking god, I've been seeing this all last year. Complete 2025, I open every daily, every other video. Double tap. Stock market is overvalued. He can't, I think the economy's gonna crash. There's gonna be a crash. There's gonna be a crash. Where's the crash? Good luck trying to short it.
Economy down with it. This also makes the fact that people are treating it like a foregone conclusion all the more dangerous. But perhaps we have all been missing the more important question, which is, what does a good outcome actually look like at this point? Is there any way that we could still quietly back out of this unscathed? So to really hedge our bets, we need to look at the 3 ways this technology could pan out and what each of them would do to the economy that regular people live in. The optimistic outcome, where artificial intelligence becomes exponentially more capable and comprehensively substitutes human workers in almost every profession. The pessimistic.
I can demonstrate this very easy on the video stock here. The crash is here! Everything's going on! Tariffs are gonna ruin our economy! I swear to God, we're in the bottom, people are doing this. Not at the top, but right here. On the bottom. It's gonna go lower. It's gonna go lower. It's gonna go lower. We have a .com, but rather than... Oh my freaking God! Tariffs are ending, but DeepSeek! Nabia's over! Nabia's over! DeepSeek is here! They don't need to spend so much money on chips! .com bubble! .com bubble! 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 Random bubble! Random bubble! Me bubble. This is the top. We're in a bubble. I'm in a bubble. Oh my god, it's gonna go lower. It's gonna crash. We're in bubble. We're in bubble. Oh my god, the class is here. It's gonna go lower. It's gonna go lower. Look at this. Oh my god, we're in a bubble. It's gonna go lower. It's gonna go lower. It's gonna lower. It's gonna lower. We're in bubble. And Winmo, look at this. Oh, it's definitely gonna go lower. I'm not joking. Then you can do a history. But I know that crashes here. Just be something to be a stock, and when they did it, and when they're calling the top stock, and look at now, it's still a higher price than all these stocks. See? And man, the whole time I over here. Yeah, James, yeah, walk out.
Outcome where technology plateaus and it becomes clear that trillions of dollars worth of data centers were a huge waste of resources, and perhaps the scariest outcome of all, which is a scenario where this technology finds some useful applications, but overall just continues to be a bit meh. So the optimistic outcome is what most of the big AI companies and personalities are pitching to the world. That is, with the exception of Peter Thiel. I am not really sure what he wants.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well, anyway, the idea of this scenario is that AI models and the tools they enable get so good that it renders most human work obsolete. And whatever human work is left becomes thousands of times more productive thanks to tools that do the non-creative work for us. Skilled trades are done by highly capable humanoid robots, logistics is fully automated, and even health and elderly services leverage mechanical muscles and mechanical minds to care for an aging population with a smaller group of actual doctors watching over everything. Eventually, the only jobs left will be those that need human creativity, assuming we can't automate that too. If you have always wanted to design your own video game, you won't need a full development team. You could just vibe code your way through production with AI tools, creating something that used to take thousands of real man-hours. Yes, I know a lot of you actual developers or skilled artisans are rolling your eyes right now. But remember, this is the dream scenario the AI companies are selling. And to play devil's advocate, it's kind of already happening. Even if you completely ignore the current focus on generative AI and robotics, there are hundreds of technologies that have already done the same thing. To use the example of making your own game again, there are modern development platforms and tools that have made it far easier for a single person to put together a pretty good game even working out of their bedroom. The same thing has happened across almost every industry in our economy. It's the reason why our labor productivity gets better and better almost every year, meaning for every hour that we work, we are producing more value. The optimistic view of new AI technology is that it will accelerate this trend so much that just a few hours of human labor, mostly to oversee the work of the machines, will produce enough value to give us a lifestyle we couldn't even dream of today. So yeah, even if we lose our 9-to-5 jobs, it won't really matter because there will be so much stuff getting made that only a minuscule amount of hours will need to be traded in return for everything you could ever need. In fact, for a lot of people, it could be so minimal that it's not really worth having any kind of formal employment at all. Everybody from Sam Altman to Jerome Powell has said the same thing about AI improving productivity, although admittedly with differing degrees of optimism. And the thing is, the idea itself isn't inherently wrong. But there is a small problem. Worker productivity has already increased by a lot for a number of reasons, including technology. But for at least 50 years, almost none of that increase has resulted in higher compensation for regular workers. So then, why would this time be any different? Well, the big AI players actually do have some answers to this obvious question, but these talking points need to be considered alongside some logical ironies that would almost be funny if they weren't so important. So the widening productivity compensation gap is one of the most hotly debated issues in all of economics because everybody has something different they would like to blame it on. Some people will say that migration has flooded the labor market with people who are willing to accept lower wages for the same job. Some people point to women entering the workforce, which also increased the total supply of workers. Some people point to outsourcing high labor industries like manufacturing or technologies like computer systems that made the same amount of clerical work possible with a far smaller team. Then, of course, other people will say it is because labor unions were crippled in the early 1980s, which made it harder for workers to negotiate collectively and turn the jobs market into every man for themselves. Now, the reality is that it was probably a little bit of everything, because they all effectively did the same thing. businesses got access to a greater supply of
It's funny how like when you talk to like a specific customer, they'll only point out like one of these things. I'm like, oh my god, this is too plain. No, this is the plain. And when it's really it's a collection of. Also, are you still there? I was wondering what you thought about when I went over in the video stat about the feed. Oh my god, the bubble's coming.
labor than they demanded and without any negotiating power that pushed labor prices down. AI is really just another technology that will mean businesses demand fewer employees to perform the same operations, and something that reduces negotiating power as well. A report published by the executive outplacement firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas tracks layoff announcements and categorizes them by type. This year, outside of federal worker layoffs from Doge, the #1 reason cited for layoffs was a cost-cutting shift towards AI. In total, since the firm started tracking this category of layoffs in 2023, more than 150,000 job losses have been directly attributed to this technology. Now, I know what you're about to say. Yes, a lot of companies are just claiming that they are doing layoffs because of AI, when really they just want an investor-friendly way of saying that they are cutting costs. But that's actually exactly the point. Even without the ultra-optimistic tools that could be made possible by this technology, it's already becoming a great negotiating tool against workers pushing the gap further apart rather than closing it. So this is where we get onto the narrative of living in a world of such material abundance that the idea of money becomes completely irrelevant. It's a nice idea, but there are a few problems. As I was putting this video together, a group of researchers from OpenAI very publicly resigned because they said that the company's economic studies were slowly being pushed into outright AI advocacy. If they found something that would present a future of AI in a negative light, they would just bury it and broaden the scope of their research until the results looked good. One of them was quoted saying, the economic research team was veering away from doing real research and instead acting like its employer's propaganda arm. Now, this is just the word of one man, but he probably gave up a pretty big payday to get the message out. And it does align with other reports coming out of the organization. The technically separate organization Open Research conducted one of the biggest universal basic income experiments ever on low-income households. The results were mixed, at best, but the headline press releases were overly positive about how great an AI-powered UBI future will be for everybody. Now, maybe it shouldn't be shocking that research coming out of a company with a very clear motivation to push mass AI adoption would be a little bit biased, but the ironies do go deeper than that. Remember when OpenAI was a nonprofit and the founders didn't care about making
Yeah, I always remember that OpenAI was supposed to be non-profit, and now it went to IPO at $1 trillion.
money off it? Well, according to reports from Reuters, it is now gearing up to go public in a...
I swear to God, I had no idea that was coming. That just reinforces the point.
move that could net the CEO as much as $10 billion. Now, if only he still had any economists left on his team, they could tell him that all of that money will be meaningless in the coming AI utopia. Alright, joking aside though, it's pretty clear that even if this technology meets the expectations of even the most ambitious techno-optimists, there are very few systems in place to ensure that the increased productivity from AI actually benefits regular people. It's a lot of techno-pseudo-economic jargon to try and gloss over what you probably already know, which is that if the people that own these tools can make a lot of money off not needing to pay workers anymore, they are going to try their very best to do it. But that was the optimistic outcome. The most immediate fear that a lot of people have right now is that the hype around this technology will die off and bring down the entire economy with it. Again, as I was putting this video together, the jobs report for November was published after October was skipped due to the government shutdown. Overall, unemployment rose to 4.6% with an additional 4.1%.
Yeah, remember, this is a little outdated as far as economic data like this, but I think it gotten a little bit better. I don't know offhand. I think the unemployment rate itself is a little bad, and the inflation pulled up a little bit, but inflation is still like higher than it should be, and the feds are fighting. Do we hold rates for longer? Do we increase rates? We can't increase rates with the current but so it's still a very difficult situation right now.
Of people in part-time or gig work who would prefer to be working full-time. This is the highest it has been since 2021, and it's clearly trending upwards. This is also before revisions, which have consistently been downwards for every report so far this year. It's not great, but the numbers have been helped a lot by three standout categories. The first two were healthcare and social services, primarily to look after an aging and ailing population. The third category was construction, specifically specialized non-residential construction, or in plain English, all of those data centers. This was something that the BLS explicitly highlighted in its March report and has only become more relevant as the rate of data center buildouts accelerates and other government infrastructure projects are scaled back. Now, eventually this will be a problem because, theoretically, we are going to slow down on building these data centers at some point before we turn our entire solar system into a Matryoshka brain.
So there's still like a lot of things. Like, I would love to go build a Dyson Sphere on the solar system and make the world's gigantic data center with the entire energy output of the sun.
Accelerates and other government infrastructure.
Are you familiar with the Dyson Sphere? Okay, they're talking about concepts like that right here.
Infrastructure projects are scaled back. Now, eventually this will be a problem because, theoretically, we are going to slow down on building these data centers at some point before we turn our entire solar system into a Matryoshka brain.
So there's still like a lot of things. Like, I would love to go build a Dyson Sphere on the solar system and make the world's gigantic data center with the entire energy output of the sun. But obviously we can't do that.
Oh, his lively voice. I actually didn't catch the first time he actually said it. Oops. But yeah, Ben, he does make a little joke when he said the entire solar system is gonna be a hydrogen generating source. I thought that was a little funny. I'm like, yeah, you said about the Dyson Sphere. I didn't notice the granular voice bringing up to, I'm not as that and a puzzle snail land, blah.
Right now, so that one has to wait a couple decades.
Okay, my mistake. Well, at least for the next few decades, I guess. Anyway, the total employment up and down the supply chain for these buildouts is very hard to precisely calculate, but it is in the hundreds of thousands according to most industry estimates. A lot of this construction is also taking place in remote rural areas where these companies have been able to lobby for favorable local tax and regulatory treatments. Now, that whole game is a separate problem that I know that the old team over at Micro is actually making a video on, so I am not going to steal their thunder on exactly how messed up this can all get. But
We're gonna have a Dyson Sphere in 2 decades, and the video will only keep on selling double digits revenue every quarter because we need more NVIDIA GPUs on the Dyson Sphere.
the point is, as it relates to employment, a lot of on-the-site workers doing this construction are only in these locations while buildouts are happening. That's very stimulating to the local economy for the 2 years it takes to get these facilities online. But if it slows down nationwide, it could have broader employment.
Buy NVIDIA now, because in 2 decades it'll be $1,000 worth of share because of the Dyson Sphere. Yeah, I'm gonna use NVIDIA GPUs to mine the asteroids. And SpaceX will buy NVIDIA GPUs for their SpaceX mining Mars asteroid innovations.
impacts beyond just the workers directly in the supply chain. Now, in the short term, even if this technology never becomes commercially viable, it could be written off as tech companies using the piles of cash they have accumulated to fund their own jobs program for a couple of years. It would be like if the wealthy old man from up the road paid you and your friends $1 million to dig a giant hole in his backyard. Would there have been a better way to use those resources? Probably. But it wouldn't cause any other ongoing problems, right? Well, it might actually, and we will get to that. But right now, the concern is about the existing problems it is covering up. $400 billion in capital expenditure this year alone is a pretty big economic stimulus. Nationwide, according to data from Bloomberg and Renaissance Macro, company spending on AI is now contributing more to GDP growth than consumer spending. That money is ultimately flowing from the big bank accounts of big tech firms and investment funds into the hands of thousands of businesses, suppliers, and workers. In fact, if we just look at the numbers alone, then in terms of money being pumped into an otherwise unhealthy economy, this is almost exactly the same as the combined stimulus and troubled asset relief program spending from 2008 to 2009 to stabilize the economy after the GFC. Now, of course, these payments are not as direct. And for now, the good news is that most of this money is still coming from cash reserves these companies already had.
Oh yeah, I forget that. Since it's very obvious, we're gonna have millions of GPUs in space to power this Dyson sphere. Maybe going to college for electronic engineering could build these new GPUs and your new Mars space colony. Is a good idea.
With borrowing mostly being used for cash flow purposes. But it should still give you a sense of scale as to how much economic activity is being generated on the contingency that AI hype continues. If that gets taken away very suddenly, it could quickly reveal how shaky everything else was under the surface. Then, of course, there is the wealth effect of people watching the green line go up. A lot of retirees and independently wealthy households have seen their investment portfolios almost double over just the last 5 years, which means that they have been a lot happier to spend conspicuously. This spending may be very uneven, but in theory at least, someone renovating their vacation home or buying a 5th sports car is at least giving money to contractors or a commission to a car salesman. A lot of people living off their investments actually have a set drawdown rate of about 3 to 4% for their everyday spending. You might have heard about the 4% rule for early retirement, and this rule prescribes that you don't spend more than 4% of the value of your invested assets every year so that you don't eat into your principal wealth. Now, if your portfolio doubles in value over 5 years, that means you can do twice as much spending without changing your 4% rule. Now, a lot of wealthier households are not this mathematically rigid, but the wealth effect happens subconsciously as well. My good friend Ben Felix has done a series of great videos on this subject, as well as a video he made last week analyzing the current risks in our very concentrated investment market. So if you're interested in a detailed breakdown of these ideas, I will leave a link to them below. If people see the value of their homes double, even though it's difficult to...
We can watch this if you're interested in that. The psych nerd can speak. The effects of the mind about seeing your portfolio go up and how that can affect the overall economy with increased spending on
actually access those funds, they are still going to be more likely to get themselves to do something like a big remodel. Now, so far, this has actually helped to keep things ticking along. But it's also no secret that a lot of these companies might be a teensy bit overvalued. The only market worth disrupting after burning this much capital is the labor market. Even a small slice out of the $12 trillion worth of annual payroll could recoup these costs pretty quickly. But without that, investors are only going to have so much patience. Even then, it's not exactly this straightforward. One of the biggest ironies in this push to automate jobs is that the tech bros are trying to automate jobs that barely make any money in the first place. Uber drivers subsidize the wear, tear, and depreciation of their cars, and the taxpayer frequently subsidizes warehouse workers with food stamps. The financial reality behind taking these kinds of jobs with expensive technology is questionable at best. And if too many people start asking those questions, that could be a problem.
Yeah, why are we replacing cheap pay with expensive technology so you're spending 3 times as much money to get the same result? What?
If these values are reconsidered in a major way, then both infrastructure spending and investment-fueled household spending would fall simultaneously, seriously hurting employment. We have always wanted Green Line to go up, but never before has so much real employment depended on it. If this technology does turn out to be everything investors are hoping for, it's going to take our jobs. And if it becomes clear it can't do that, it will very likely crash a very frothy and concentrated market. And we are going to lose our jobs. It sounds pretty bad, right? Well, there is actually a third option. It's almost become the assumption that this will all end spectacularly, but there isn't actually any guarantee of that. For now, the companies involved have more than enough cash between them to cover outside debt. And even if less liquid players like OpenAI can't meet the record-setting spending obligations with companies like Oracle, the recourse to actually collect on those payments isn't very strong. Nobody wants to sue the next person along from them in the financial circle jerk.
I'm so happy that my lawyers have something to do. I'm so happy that I get to sue how money works and show them how the legal system works.
Well, almost nobody, I suppose. Anyway, to keep their own market stable, the most likely thing to happen is that these companies setting spending obligations with companies like Oracle, the recourse to actually collect on those payments isn't very.
Remember when we talked about Oracle before, I think that, and how the stock market was losing confidence with Oracle and like making money of all their debt. I won the car some not to buy it up. For those feel it's going to make it more. That's it. Yeah, I thought it's so gross, yeah. Now maybe it's a lie. Maybe. I mean, the reason why I say it's a song, maybe, because for parang ichiwan joining school, Guy Menzel, it likes this 120 zone. And which way out there. Famous 116. I was actually interested to see what I would do around 116 and 120 is right close to them. So I might hang around here for a while. If it does, and actually the fear might finally rain out. Might need more time, I think, but this is starting to respect along this price point. How's in the messages of that? Like that.
Strong. Nobody wants to sue the next person along from them in the financial circle jerk.
I think it was when I first started this. What's that? Come on. Yeah. It was like on this day or something. I'm like, this can be a good idea about new. I said design specifically on this day too. I'm like, this could be a golden cat balance and it's gonna be cheaper on Monday. It's gonna be really cheaper on Monday. And I think last week on Monday, Tuesday, I was talking about this. I was like, you might want to stay away for it. It's by while. And on this day, I simply called myself from here. While I was doing this, I'm like, I called myself from here to like, he hasn't replied to me since. And yeah, this was last week. What's that look like?
I'm so happy that my lawyers have something to do. I'm so happy that I get
cover outside debt. And even if less liquid players like OpenAI can't meet the record-setting spending obligations with companies like Oracle, the recourse to actually collect on those payments isn't very strong. Nobody wants to sue the next person along from them in the financial circle jerk.
I'm so happy that my lawyers have something to do. I'm so happy that I get to sue how money works and show them how the legal system works.
Well, almost nobody, I suppose. Anyway, to keep their own market stable, the most likely thing to happen is that these companies just take equity in exchange for compute time or quietly renegotiate commitments behind the scenes and just stretch them out over longer periods of time. So, even if advancements continue to slow down, this could plod
those
along for a
companies
lot
can't
longer than
pay
you
their
might expect.
obligations, you
But in the
know,
long term,
that's
this
gonna
kind
be
of
a fact,
scenario
like
could
you see
actually
Oracle
be
right
an
now,
equally
it's gonna be
damaging
like
outcome.
Nvidia and all
Consistent
the
investment
others.
into AI above anything else is going to starve other hopeful technologies of getting the funding they need for development. The joke about putting AI in the name of the company to get investment is true, but a lot of companies do it because they need that investment to develop their product. An anecdotal example I saw while putting this video together was the startup Boom Supersonic. It has been raising money for the past decade to develop a modern supersonic passenger jet aircraft. Now, maybe you think faster air travel is a worthy technology to pursue. Maybe you don't, but that doesn't really matter. The point is that this month they came out with a new product, which was basically taking one of their jet engines and attaching it to a generator, which they were pitching as a new and innovative way to power data centers. Now, this of course is just one example, but startups trying to develop new technologies are all being forced to play some version of the same game to keep funding going. On a larger scale, there has been a big push towards reshoring manufacturing. This may very well be a noble goal with strategic value, but it's also made much harder by rising energy costs and electrical grids that need to support factories as well as data centers. Right now, the data centers can just afford to pay more, which means factories and regular households have to suffer the financial consequences. The same kind of financial crowding out is happening in a lot of markets already. The reason you are going to need to sell a kidney to afford 2 gigs of RAM is because
Thank you for making my laptop cost $1,000 more because of this virtual AI.
because the entire production base is being redirected towards serving this one industry. Going all in on one hand may or may not pay off, but it also means we don't have any chips left to take better bets if and when they come along. But go and watch this extended cut video next to see why we can't trust economic data anymore. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
So hey, questions about... I know, I went off kind of a tangent because it's semi-related to the colleges, but after hearing all that, do you understand more of the cost analysis of your nephew might be facing with, I think you said nephew? With going to college. Yeah. Do you have any questions based on some more specific questions on concepts like this? Because a conversation and its college is and like corpse for him is very bad, especially with the cost, unless you can find reasonable cost for it. Like he said earlier in the video about quote-unquote alternative investments and nightmares, I believe. Oh, because they kicked the controllers. Yeah. Listen. Yeah, say going to college, there might be a cheaper way to return. It's very important to ask questions like, what are all the different like get an idea of like more than like compare path the reasons he might be might his dream job maybe steer to a secondary dream job you never thought about, or introduce him to some hobbies he might like, something they never thought about. So like for example, say he's the tech subby, his brain's a tech, designing like an engine, like a physical demanding job, like some type of construction job, 10 years that engineering aspect of his and that might require less funding in a trade school, for example. So there are creative ways how to apply to apply what you're interested in for clean. Yeah, like I said, I would need more specifics on like what his interests are to get better ideas. But yeah, I think it's worth thinking about with these concepts though. And like you said, even the orange last, like the Alex Tiberii talked about, some people just want a job based on what they're passionate in. And there are ways to like weasel that into something more valuable depending on what money likes. He isn't trying to narrow you want to write blueprints. Yeah, that can start out most of my gym start as a construction job, like a physical construction job. And you can build the engineering aspect off of that. Maybe you run a business based on that, who knows? But yeah, you can move into that from a physical. You can start out the physical in the Jackson's, I'm sure. I'm not actually. I'm just giving ideas of what to think. That's shitty. That's like. The dumb Felix would. Let me see it. Dang, I knew I should have started work at somebody's other also my best way to find out the tank thing. Very learn.
To college or not to college, just digital nomads are safer, cleaner,
Was he on the bill he bought gave up? Hey, man, well, it was way months of that Felix thing. Was this before we started talking about motor coding?
include anybody from the tech worker sailing around the world, submitting their code once a day via Starlink, to a traveling nurse living out of a van,
yeah,
to someone who's
technomads.
landed a good
Let's buy my Nvidia stock because technomads rule the world. And SpaceX with Starlink, them.
It will only be because it has taken all of our jobs. Whether we like it or not, our immediate economic future is riding.
Oh, I remember. Then T-Rex and the inflation there. I can just look it up. Let's see. I think this is related. I am a Lexus. Let me try this. It's titled "The Psychologically of Homeownership." I can't speak.
Alright guys, before I start the video, I know I have hair. Yes, it's real. No, it's not a transplant. I do appreciate all the compliments, and I'm sorry about your girlfriend. Let's try to stay focused on the content of the video. Renting and owning a home can be financially comparable. This has been the case in historical data in the US and Canada, and forward-looking estimates suggest it will be similar in the future. Renters need to be disciplined savers and investors to make it work, but the expected financial outcomes from renting and owning are similar. People will want to argue with me on that point, but let's just take...
This sounds like might be more owning versus renting, and the thing with renting is you might be able to invest some more money than you would be able to do compared to owning. Well, let's see ways.
Take it as a given for now and discuss what I think is an even more interesting question. Finances aside, are homeowners happier than renters? I'm Ben Felix, Portfolio Manager at PWL Capital, and I'm going to tell you how homeownership is related to happiness. Choosing whether to rent or own a home is a huge financial decision. Owning has the benefit of security of tenure, nobody will rent-evict you or jack up the rent, but it comes with significant idiosyncratic risk, like major structural problems with the home, and market risk, the risk of the real estate market dropping. Renting can be less secure, especially when housing costs are rising rapidly, and it requires more discipline with saving to accumulate wealth, but it's also a lot more flexible and doesn't require owning a big, illiquid, risky asset. Based on their unique attributes, depending on your situation, either renting or owning can make sense. On average, over a long period of time, financial outcomes for renters and owners should be similar in an efficient market, and models show they have been similar in Canada and the US for decades, with a slight edge for renters. I think it's a reasonable starting point to say that renting and owning are financially comparable. Even when people agree with me on that point, I'm usually told that life as an owner is just better. A lot of people seem to believe that owning a home is necessary for living a good life. Being a homeowner is romanticized as a means to happiness, while renting is painted as misery. I'm skeptical. I have owned my home for the last 3 years, but rented for many years before that, and personally, I'm no happier as an owner. I'm probably a little less happy because I find home maintenance tasks to be really annoying. If someone is truly happier,
I find concepts like this similar to the college thing. It's because other generations tend to be like, well, you have to own a home, you have to own a home, you have to own a home, you have to go to college, you have to go to college.
owning than renting, that's great. Personal preferences matter. But I'm not convinced that owning a home should be prescribed as a path to contentment. Renting can certainly have its issues. Rising rents, unattentive landlords, and unexpected rent evictions are sure to cause headaches. But homeownership can cause headaches too. Being your own landlord is time-consuming and often stressful. I bought a house because we moved to a rural area without a lot of rental options. I really like where we live now because I can go mountain biking, kayaking, and skiing all within a 15-minute walk from my house. But if I could have found a single-family home for rent in the same area, I would have done that instead. To be fair to homeownership, an owned home can offer feelings of control, security, and even pride, but renting has its own well-being benefits in its relatively hands-off nature and flexibility. Taken together, it's not obvious whether we should expect owning a home to make people happier on average. My personal experience and opinion only take this conversation so far, but the good news is that the question of whether homeowners are happier than renters has been studied extensively using large data sets from Canada, Switzerland, the US, and Germany, and the results are pretty insightful. The 2021 study, Homeownership and Happiness, Evidence from Canada, uses panel data from the Canadian National Population Health Survey to examine the impact of homeownership on individual happiness. The study controls for individual effects that influence happiness, like personality traits, and finds that owning a home has no significant impact on happiness. This Canadian study does find that in the lowest income category, owning a home negatively impacts happiness, likely due to the financial burden that homeownership creates for lower income people. Similarly, 2024 data from
Well, there are, like with the college things, there are people to push people into college that are financially motivated. And then those same people can be financially motivated, keeping them out of jobs, so they go back to college to spend more money on college. And there are people that benefit from clicking yet to buy a home. So, yeah, conflicts of interest there.
Statistics Canada suggests that for comparable individuals living in comparable dwellings and neighborhoods, renters and owners report similar levels of satisfaction. This means that holding things like the type and quality of the dwelling and financial health and marital status of the individual constant, the impact of homeownership on life satisfaction, if there is any, is small. This makes sense to me. All else equal, why would owning rather than renting a home make people happier on average? Moving outside of Canada, the 2019 paper Homeownership and Happiness, Evidence for Switzerland uses data from the Swiss Household Panel to find that there is no or even a negative relationship for homeownership making people happy in Switzerland. The authors find that other factors such as the financial status of the household, health, age, and partnership have a much stronger impact on happiness. While the happiness gains that I am told exist seem elusive in the data, future homeowners often overestimate the psychological benefits of owning a home. The 2022 study, Does the Dream of Homeownership Rest on Biased Beliefs?, finds for over 800 future homeowners in Germany that while homeownership does elevate life satisfaction in their sample, it does so much less than people anticipate when they purchase a home. This is not surprising because people tend to adapt to their circumstances. The upward bias in expected happiness is stronger for homebuyers who value extrinsic things like status and money. For these people, buying a home may be a status symbol. Compared to people with intrinsic goals like personal growth, intimacy, and community, extrinsically motivated people are less happy in general, and they overestimate the emotional benefits of achieving their extrinsic goals. This study suggests that careful thought about why you want to own a home and how it will affect your life is worthwhile. One important
I'm sure something like this applies to colleges as well, especially when you go to colleges and then go to workplace that has nothing to do with your degree. You're gonna be like very bummed out.
consideration is how owning a home will affect how you spend your time day to day. Happiness is largely shaped by how we spend our time minute to minute, rather than more stable life circumstances that we adapt to. The 2011 study, The American Dream or the American Delusion, uses data on US women to find that after controlling for income, housing quality, and health, homeowners in the sample are no better off than renters by multiple measures of well-being. Instead, owners derive significantly more pain from their homes. A potential explanation is time use differences. Homeowners in the sample spend less time on enjoyable activities like active leisure, which are associated with elevated well-being. As a homeowner myself, I can tell you that home maintenance tasks have stopped me from doing fun stuff on many occasions. The other reality for homeowners is that in most cases, they will need a large mortgage to finance their purchase. Mortgages are a great way for young people to access leverage, which can be a good thing financially, but a big pile of debt can take a psychological toll. The 2024 study, In Debt But Still Happy, uses panel data from Germany to find a positive relationship between housing satisfaction and homeownership, but no significant positive effects of a home purchase on life satisfaction in the long term. The authors show that mortgage debt negatively impacts life satisfaction, and increasingly so with larger mortgages relative to incomes. They conclude that the mortgage burden of owning a home can offset any positive psychological effects of homeownership. This is particularly relevant in Canada right now, where the government has relaxed mortgage rules to allow people to borrow more money to purchase homes. If people incorrectly believe that buying a home will make them happy, or overestimate the happiness benefits of owning a home and take on a huge amount of debt to do it, they may end up less happy overall. Choosing how to pay for housing is an important life decision with financial and non-financial implications. Financially, renting and owning should have similar long-term wealth outcomes. Non-financially, owning a home is unlikely to increase your life satisfaction, and if it does, it probably won't increase it as much as you expected. In some cases, owning a home may even decrease happiness by soaking up your active leisure time with home maintenance tasks and saddling you with a big pile of debt. There are good reasons to buy a home, like wanting to secure your housing in a specific location that you want to settle in. But buying a home on the expectation that it will make you happier is likely to lead to disappointment. Thanks for watching. I'm Ben Felix, Portfolio Manager at PWL Capital. If you want to learn more...
So yeah, I really think there's like similar chances with that and like in college degrees as well, with how much debt it burns you especially, and so that impacts happiness. But it depends on the person. Some people have a very strong tolerance against that. For myself, I actually never got a job that was related to my college degree, so it makes me feel like maybe I'm wasting money. This is another thing that you need to
a
consider.
150%
That's if
increase
you're
since
watching,
2019 alone. In this survey, digital nomads could include
Righteous
anybody from the tech
benefit
worker
from
sailing
this
around the
digital
world,
nomad
submitting their
thing.
code once a day via Starlink, to a traveling nurse living out of a van, to someone who simply moved to a more affordable city temporarily to work remotely. In their research, the team for HBR found that the #1 reason that people were pursuing this unrooted lifestyle was because they couldn't afford a more typical way of life. And if they were going to be uncomfortable both physically
So, like, this digital nomad thing, and you're actually doing you're not buying them, you're renting, so, yeah. I remember after I got my degree, feel like I was wasting a bunch of money and time. Ultimately worked out for me a lot so much for me. That's why, more serious talks should be, more serious talks should take place of, is our degree really right for you or not? Not just, college is good for everyone, go college, yeah, you're gonna get more money, blah 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 blah. That's actually not true. It actually depends on the person. Every person's situation is different, and they don't consider that when they're trying to pitch going to college to everyone. Everyone's unique. Not everyone's everyone. I swear this link is not in the description. Anyways, I can probably dig out Muscle and Killer 8. You can look at it on a different day. It's not a problem. And say, Delcy, you want to talk about easy you go around this time of the trip. We should sign your video. let's see. I know. What? I suddenly said this. Can't believe it. I'm 64% my daily processor. Cool. The sound I have was last a second. But yeah, thank you. Talking about this might be interesting.
One of the benefits of index investing is supposed to be broad diversification, but right now 36% of the S&P 500 index consists of just 7 stocks.
This is a
If we look at the total
video.
US market,
It's
that
so
number is
interesting.
32%. That is the most extreme level of index concentration in US market history going back to 1927. US stock market valuations are also nearing their 1999 peaks, which were, of course, followed by a decade of flat, at best, US stock returns. I get it. This does seem concerning. If that handful of stocks declines in value, the effect on the overall market could be substantial. This is a movie we have seen before up here in Canada. In July of the year 2000, one stock made up about 36% of the entire Canadian market index, subsequently crashing, eventually becoming worthless, and dragging the market down with it. The good news is that mitigating the worst of these situations is not actually that hard. I'm Ben Felix, Chief Investment Officer at PWL Capital, and I'm going to tell you how to prepare for the aftermath of the AI bubble.
He might.
All right, I've got to
be
come clean
giving
up
advice
front.
how
I
to
don't
give
actually know if
extra
there is an AI bubble.
different
Nobody does.
dispersed
That's only
opinions.
knowable in hindsight. That being said, some wild stuff has been happening in the US stock market. Companies have been spending at a blistering rate to build out the infrastructure needed to capitalize on the supposed AI revolution. This type of spending often coincides with the development of revolutionary technologies. Railroad and internet stocks followed a similar path of high asset prices, massive investment, and an eventual painful fall in asset prices, which we might describe as a bubble after the fact. Stock price bubbles, or periods of unusually high stock prices followed by much lower prices, are an age-old feature of financial markets. They are often, but not always, sparked by some new technology that promises huge profits for those developing it. The history of technology bubbles goes back to at least the 1700s and has followed a similar pattern with each successive major technological innovation. In this video, I want to talk about the two main features of the current US market which seem to be causing some investors to worry. One is market valuations, the other is market concentration. These are two loosely related measures. Market valuations measure how expensive it is to buy the expected future earnings of companies, and market concentration measures how concentrated the market's total value is in a small number of stocks. High market valuations are generally associated with lower future returns, while market concentration has a much noisier relationship, if there's any relationship at all. Market valuations and market concentration may both increase around the development of new technologies simply due to the fact that as some companies rise in value due to their association with the new technology, they will make up a larger portion of the market. Bubbles are exciting on the way up, often inducing FOMO, fear of missing out, that may further feed into the bubble dynamics, and then they are painful on the way down, both psychologically and often economically or financially for the people who invested in them. Bubbles are not all bad though. High stock prices that arise from speculation about the profitability of a revolutionary technology can help to facilitate that technology's development and deployment into the economy. Classic examples are the massive spending on installing fiber optic cables in the late 90s and on installing railway track in the 1840s. In both cases, many of the companies involved were able to raise a ton of money and achieve temporarily high stock prices as excited investors piled in, but their share prices subsequently crashed. Bubbles do tend to come with waste,
So-
too much
so it sounds like
unused
he's-
fiber optic
he's trying
cable,
to,
too much
get
redundant railway track.
reciprocation of
But despite the
essence
waste, the
relating
infrastructure for the respective
advice.
technologies does get created, paving the way for a potential economic golden age to follow. These productive bubbles are probably on net a good thing for the economy, even if they can be painful for investors. The pattern of investor excitement and high stock prices surrounding technological revolutions or potential technological revolutions goes back hundreds of years, and it always follows this similar path. Stock prices are driven up by some combination of high profit potential from the revolutionary technology, and once it starts rising, speculation that the associated stocks will continue rising. Eventually, prices do come back to earth, resulting in low returns for anyone who bought near the top. Whether that's what we're seeing in the US right now, again, can only be known in hindsight. Prices could remain high. The rapid rise in prices of the top US stocks has also been accompanied by rapid earnings growth. It's not pure hype. There is some economic substance here. What we do know is that a large portion of the US market's return, earnings growth, and capital expenditure has come from AI-related stocks since the launch of ChatGPT. A September 2025 report from JP Morgan explains that AI-related stocks have accounted for 75% of S&P 500 returns, 80% of earnings growth, and 90% of capital spending growth since ChatGPT launched in November 2022. We also know that US stock market concentration, which was already high, has shot up even further. Stock market concentration and high stock valuations are, again, different issues, but they can be related by the fact that a rapid rise in valuations for a small number of firms can also lead to market concentration. To be completely clear, in case I wasn't already, I am not taking a position on whether we are witnessing a bubble in the US stock market, but I think it's useful to look at past instances of high stock market valuations and market concentration to understand the potential implications and lessons. The Canadian example that I mentioned earlier is even more extreme than what we're currently seeing in the US market. Northern Electric and Manufacturing Co. was spun off from Bell Canada in 1895. In 1998, it was renamed Nortel Networks. During the dot-com bubble, Nortel's early work in optical networking technologies propelled it to the forefront of the internet infrastructure revolution. It was making truly useful stuff that the world needed or thought it needed. Its stock price soared, creating huge amounts of wealth for it.
So it looks like he's starting concepts of how this took place in the past. Every time there's a bubble on new technology, the new technology saying we civilization for the better, but some investors lost money from buying it.
Investors and for the many employees who received stock-based compensation. Incredibly, the company peaked at over 36% of the Canadian stock market index, at the time called the TSE 300. Nortel, and thus the Canadian stock market, had extremely high valuations in August of the year 2000, peaking at a Shiller cyclically adjusted price-earnings ratio of 60.62, far surpassing the peak valuation of the U.S. stock market during the same dot-com period. The Shiller cyclically adjusted price-earnings ratio measures market prices against the index's 10-year average real historical earnings. On the assumption that long-term earnings growth tends to be steady, a high Shiller PE means that investors are paying a lot more for future earnings and should therefore expect lower future returns unless earnings end up being unusually high in the future, which can happen. Nortel's downfall started with a string of unprofitable internet-related acquisitions and was accelerated by the dot-com bubble popping. The result for the Canadian stock market was devastating. The Canadian TSE 300 index dropped by 43% between September 2000 and September 2002. That obviously hurts. There are two lessons that I think are important to explain here. First, while this drop was definitely painful, I don't want to minimize that, the market recovered by July 2005, and it went on to deliver strong returns, while the US market, as I'll detail in a minute, struggled for more than a decade. Despite having been more concentrated, the Canadian market was more resilient than the US market. The Nortel crash was, in hindsight, a short blip in a long track record of strong performance for Canadian stocks. Second, while the Canadian market as a whole was hurt by its exposure to Nortel, Canadian value stocks, a Canadian value stock index, so stocks with low prices relative to their fundamentals, did not crash when the overall market did, and it actually delivered even stronger returns than the market on the recovery. This will come up again in my next examples too. The US market did not have such extreme concentration in 1999 as it does today or as Canada did back then, but it did have high stock prices, which were, in hindsight, mostly unjustified by fundamentals. Some companies like Microsoft and Amazon came through the other side and proved that there was real transformational potential in the internet, but the vast majority of companies that tried to capitalize on the internet failed. This led to the famous dot-com bubble and the subsequent lost decade for US stocks. The US market crashed starting around March of 2000 and, measured in Canadian dollar terms, remained flat or below flat until July of 2013. That is another brutal period of technology-induced high prices, leading to low realized stock returns for investors who bought at the peak. In this case, unlike with Nortel, the recovery was not so swift. Part of the problem is that the great financial crisis intervened as stock prices were starting to recover. Either way, this technology bust was painful for US investors, or investors in US stocks in general, and even more so for investors focused on US technology stocks. It would have taken them even longer to recover. Similar to the Canadian example, an investor in US value stocks, and to an even greater extent US small cap value stocks, fared much better over this long period of poor performance for the market as a whole. They earned positive returns while the market was flat, at best, for an extended period of time. It's also worth reiterating that Canadian stocks performed reasonably well over this period. Diversification is known as the only free lunch in investing for good reason. The main problem with diversification is behavioral. It inherently means that you always own the stuff that's performing well and the stuff that's performing poorly, which is not always so easy to do. Okay, so these two examples, the Canadian and the US example, they had high market valuations in common, but the Canadian market became much more concentrated than the US market. In the past, the US market has reached high concentration levels without going on to deliver poor future returns. Not quite as high as today, but still high. I looked at this within the US market going back to 1926. I sorted 10-year future returns on the starting level of market concentration in the top 7 stocks. There's a very slight negative correlation between market concentration and future returns, but it's not statistically significant, meaning there's a good chance it's just noise in the data. But statistical significance aside.
So, this coming reinforces my point that this why stay away from the stock market because that is not necessarily a good idea. Averaging as far as the rule of averages, it's against it. If you fear the bubble like I do, just invest in something outside tech.
It's still a weak relationship economically. A point that often seems to get lost in discussions of the US market's concentration is that many other markets around the world are far more concentrated. I mean, I gave you guys the Canada example, and yet they still manage to deliver positive returns, in some cases even more so than the US market. Looking back at the last 10 years of returns, just as an example, the weight of the top 7 stocks in the 10 largest stock markets, excluding the US, was 40.94%, so higher than the US, in November 2015. So we're looking back 10 years in history. Switzerland was the most concentrated market at 60.11% in the top 7 stocks.
In case you're confused what I mean by concentrations, you know how like Nvidia is like $4 trillion and the top 7 companies is like 20% of the US market or something like that, like the S&P 500? While these other countries are even worse for concentration, is basically what you say.
And Japan was the least concentrated at 16.91%. The return from November 1st, 2015 to November 26, 2025, measured in USD, was 8.44% on average for all of these countries. That does trail the US market return, but still delivers a meaningfully positive equity risk premium. Taiwan was one of the most concentrated markets in November 2015, and it outperformed the US market over the subsequent 10-year period. The overall relationship between market concentration and future returns across countries seems to be noisy at best. An interesting sort of anecdotal perspective is AT&T, which was broken up into smaller companies starting in 1982. It was the largest company in the US market at that time, and in prior decades, not when it was broken up, but in prior decades, it made up a larger portion of the US market than Nvidia makes up today. The interesting question is, was the US market less risky after the breakup? I think that would be pretty hard to argue. You could maybe even argue the opposite. Something that does appear in the data, at least post-1950, is that returns can suffer over periods where concentration is falling. I think this again makes sense. If concentration comes from rising valuations for a handful of firms, falling valuations for those firms would lead to lagging returns. But even then, we're talking about less positive returns, not a total disaster. The relationship between market valuations and future returns is stronger, at least economically, both across markets and within the US market. To illustrate this, I looked at the relationship between the starting cyclically adjusted price earnings ratio, the CAPE ratio, and the 10-year return for the 10 largest developed stock markets going back to 1982. I looked at rolling periods with a 1-month step. I acknowledge that there are potential problems with this setup, like difficulties in comparing the CAPE ratio across countries, and from a statistical perspective, the fact that I'm using these overlapping samples,
So, what I mean by K ratio, like a K-shaped economy, is something that we're seeing right now, where like most people can't afford basic media, like oh my god, I can't afford this food, I can't afford this food, but the economies can make all-time highs. How's that possible? Because for being really rich, having a lot of money, the economy is different compared to being poor. So that divergence is what the K-shaped economy refers to.
rolling periods of the 1-month step, it does make any conclusions drawn from the data statistically questionable. Now, that being said, there is a clear monotonic relationship between starting cyclically adjusted price earnings ratio, so starting valuations, and future 10-year returns. When the CAPE ratio is higher at the start, future returns are lower. Again, this does not mean that the market must crash tomorrow or next week when valuations are high, but it might mean that it makes sense to moderate our expectations for future returns from the US market in particular due to its currently elevated valuations. The Japanese stock market had a crazy run leading up to 1990, eventually becoming the largest stock market in the world by market capitalization, surpassing even the US market for a period of time. Japan was viewed as this unstoppable economic powerhouse, and its stock market valuations reached levels rarely seen elsewhere in history. I'm not saying the US is today's Japan, but I think it's an important example to think about. At the end of 1989, the Japanese market did crash, so it had these crazy high valuations, and then prices do start to come down. The market really does crash. The crazy thing about the Japan example, though, is that it has not recovered in real terms, so if we adjust for inflation, to this day. So it crashes in the end of 1989, and now we're in almost 2026. And if you adjust for inflation, the Japanese market has still not recovered from the crash, or it's flat after the crash. Now, two things would have saved an investor in Japanese stocks in 1989. Diversification across markets, a globally diversified...
The thing to know here is, so basically, is whatever you invested at the peak, back down on Japan's crash, that investment still hasn't recovered. But Papal investment is that you continuously buy in. So as it goes lower, you continue buying, and when it goes back up, you still continue buy. That average, you probably still ahead compared back down. But I haven't touched the numbers. But the reason I bring that up is, even if the United States does something like that, if you continuously spread out your investment, you keep on going in, you'll eventually pull out ahead.
Investor did just fine as the U.S. market...
Not even applies to the Great Depression. If you did that during the Great Depression, if you bought an entry at the very top of the Great Depression, you would carve it in like 5 years.
Kind of took the torch of stock market dominance back from Japan with a vengeance. The U.S. went on to absolutely perform exceptionally well, as Japan had done previously. And then the other thing that would have helped is diversification within the Japanese market itself. Despite Japan's stock market struggles over this long period of time, as with my previous examples, Japanese value and small cap value stocks have actually performed fine over this period. Now again, this does not mean that I'm suggesting getting out of the US stock market. We could have had a very similar conversation to what we're having now in 2021 when US market valuations were high again. Not quite as high as today, but still high. That would have been a mistake. US stock returns have continued to be very positive since then. But what it does mean is not expecting the same rocket ship returns that the US market has been delivering to continue forever. The US stock market currently has these two defining features that are causing some investors to worry: high stock valuations and high market concentration. Market concentration, while seemingly problematic due to the potential impact of a few large firms faltering and bringing the market down with them, has not historically been as much of an issue as you might expect. Anecdotally, the Canadian market recovered from an extreme period of market concentration and high valuations during the dot-com bust more quickly than the less concentrated US market. Looking more broadly at the 10 largest non-US stock markets for the last 10 years, the relationship between concentration and future returns is seemingly non-existent. Looking at US returns from 1927 to 2024, there is a weak economic relationship that is not statistically significant between market concentration and future returns. Stock market valuations, on the other hand, are more impactful, and that is another concerning aspect of the US market right now. High current valuations, while not a perfect predictor of future returns, do seem to be at least somewhat related. This relationship, while it's economically strong, doesn't really hold up to statistical scrutiny for the simple reason that we don't have that many independent samples to draw conclusions from. Past market valuations tell us only a little bit about the future. It's always possible, as the US market has demonstrated in recent history, for high valuations to be followed by high returns and continued high valuations. Even if history tells us that that is an unlikely outcome, it is what we have seen. The main lessons from the information in this video, I think, are diversification and discipline, which I think are related. A properly diversified investor should be comfortable sticking with their portfolio through good times and bad, knowing they will always hold the losers. You have to accept that. Whatever's not doing well, if you're diversified, you probably own that. But you also own the winners. And people who are comfortable with their investment strategy understand that the winners that they own are going to have an edge over the losers in the long run, which is something that has been true throughout history. Thanks for watching. I'm Ben Felix, Chief Investment Officer at PWL Capital. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with someone in your life who's concerned.
That is why over fear is expensive. Rather investing is expensive. It loses to inflation. Now, outside the market, is still a loss. Because the inflation makes your money lose value. And eats it. Yeah, the inflation monster, exactly. Inflation monster. Dear the inflation. Don't be inflation. Dear the inflation. Don't be inflation. So, what do you think of all this broad information? You have any questions on there?